Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second presentation for the GA2020 virtual series. Whether you're coming on board for the first time or returning, thank you so much for joining us. This week's guest presenter is Joel Mergler. Joel is the Director of Global Training at Select Size, Worldwide Size, and is joining us from the States. Joel's a former dairy farmer and joined Select Size in 1980. He's the current Director of Global Training, as I mentioned, at Select Size, with responsibility for training and talent development. Joel has traveled to more than 75 countries in his 40-year career at Select Size. He's earned a bachelor's degree in business and communication studies from Ohio University and a master's degree in management from Indiana Wesleyan University. In this session, Joel will be discussing the global genetics industry and what that is likely to hold by 2030, or as we would like to know now, just over the next year, is a little bit up in the air. So I think this is certainly a great topic for us to once again have this evening. So welcome, Joel, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I would have rather have been there in March, but this is a lot of what this topic is about. Our long-term, even short-term future is going to continue to change. So I was excited about this topic because we're in the genetics business, and the genetics business is all about trying to figure out what we're going to need in the future. So you know, with my title here, or what's headed, where things are heading, and what will it look like in 2030, you know, I think about my own career. As you said, I started with Select Sires in 1980. So actually next Tuesday, I will have completed 40 years with Select Sires, and it's really hard to believe. So I'm getting pretty close to retirement. And when I think about 2030, my personal vision is something like this. You know, that's kind of what I had in mind. Although I must say, those aren't my legs. My legs in the sun have only two shades, white or red. But with what's happened to the stock market with COVID-19, I may still be working in 2030. So this is the way the future is. It continues to change. And if we don't understand that after what we've gone through over the last 6 months or so, we never will. But I love this industry. I'm dedicated to it, and I'm not counting the days to get out. I'm counting the days that I can continue to make a difference, because this is a great industry that in spite of how much we've been beat up over the last 6 months or 6 years, has things that we've never seen that we've had to deal with. It really makes you realize that we do have a great industry, this dairy industry, and we're going to be needed in the future, even if we're getting a little beat up right now. So when I think of my career, I look at pictures like this from 40 years ago when I was an AI technician in Wisconsin, and some of my hair's turned gray, a lot of it's turned loose. I've gained some knowledge, I've gained some weight, but it's amazing how things have changed. And a few years ago, I was on a plane. I was watching old movies, and Back to the Future was on. And this was a great movie and kind of a cool concept when you think about what we're dealing with right now. You know, the whole idea was they had this DeLorean that could go into the future or to the past, but with what we're talking about, go into the future. And I remember this scene where the professor comes back and says, "Marty, you're not going to believe it. I was just in the future, and this is what I saw." And at the time I was an AI technician in 1980, it would have been great if this could have happened. And Joel from the future could have come back and said, "Joel, you're not going to believe it. I know you're dealing with farms that look like this right now, but by the end of your career, you're going to be looking at farms that look like this with 10, 15,000 cows. Can you believe it? I know we're milking cows like this right now, but in the future, this is going to be the type of milking parlor that your customers are going to be using. In fact, you won't believe it, but cows will actually be milked by robots and fed by robots. Can you believe it? And farmers are going to spend as much time looking at a computer screen as they are looking at their cows. Now, I wouldn't have believed a lot of that stuff. He would have told me that we're no longer going to just look at the outside of a cow. We'll be able to look at that cow at the DNA level. And at a week of age, be able to pull a hair or tissue sample, and with 75% accuracy, I'll tell you the genetic potential of that animal. You won't just look at these young bulls and based on the outside. We'll look at them on the inside at the genetic level, and it's going to change the industry. This would have been hard for me to believe. Sex semen is finally going to happen. You as an AI technician are no longer going to get blamed when the farmer has too many bull calves. You'll be able to use a straw semen that's 90% female. And you'll be able to tell if a cow's in heat with a tag in her ear. Can you believe it? So if this happened to me in my career in 40 years, what's next? Where are we going from here? So what does the future hold? I got to be honest. I've heard a lot of these programs, and especially with the events of the last several months, I've got to be honest about being able to predict the future. So I'm going to give you a qualification right now that I have no freaking idea what it's going to look like in 2030. Now I'm going to give you some views based on my experience of what I'm seeing today, but I've really been shaken over the last few months about being able to predict very much, especially short term, what's going to happen. You know, if Joel from the future, from just a few months in the future, would have come back and said, Joel, you're not going to believe it, you better stock up on toilet paper. Everybody's going to be wearing masks and taking toilet paper out of the stores because there's going to be a global pandemic. And I'd say, you mean this is a respiratory pandemic and they're buying toilet paper? No, that doesn't make sense, but that's exactly what happened. So a lot of things are out of our hands that we're trying to predict. You know, I wouldn't have believed 4 or 5 months ago that our farmers in the United States would be told to dump 20 or 30% of their milk because there was no market for it. And at the same time, the grocery stores would be limiting how much milk a customer could buy. Crazy times that we live in. So I'm going to give you some ideas of what I think based on my experience and what I see, my perspective of my vision of the dairy industry. And some of this sounds pretty obvious. There's going to be less farms globally. When I started as an AI technician, there were over 100,000 dairies in the United States. Today, I think there's probably coming out of this, especially going to be less than 30,000 dairies in the US. Again, obvious stuff, more cows per operation. We're more and more everywhere in the world. Even in India, I heard this. Labor issues. And so this is going to lead to more automation, more technology. Environmental regulations are popping up everywhere. The need for more sustainable animal production. And a lot of this is tied together. As we look at things, we're not just going to look at how many kilos of milk we can get out of a cow. It's going to be sustainability. And this, again, is tied together with threats from animal activists and animal welfare issues that we're going to have to deal with as an industry. Climate change, how that's going to affect where milk is produced, how we create a cow that can thrive in the environment she's in. We're already seeing these threats from plant-based products. We're going to have to become better marketers as a dairy industry. This is going to lead to a necessity for greater efficiency, not just volume of production, but greater efficiency with whatever that means. Big data and AI, and by AI, I'm not talking about artificial insemination. We're talking about artificial intelligence. It's going to drive a lot of our decision-making as we go forward. Water issues, this is tied to climate change and other things with population, but it's going to become more and more of an issue for us as we go forward, as we're already seeing. The loss of antibiotics and hormone therapy tools. We're going to have less and less of these types of tools available to us as we go into the future. And I know a lot of this can sound pessimistic, but that's not what it's meant to be. This is the environment that we're going to be dealing with in 2030. So the question becomes, what are we going to do about it? It's not if it's good or bad, it's what are we going to do about it? And as an industry at Select Sires, we're looking at things we can do. I think there's also some positive things that are going to happen because of technology like genomics. We're going to be able to have designer genes to fit specific operations or markets or environments in the future. And so it's not going to be just one great bull for the whole world. There's going to be bulls that fit different markets. So how we're looking to deal with this as an AI, artificial insemination company at Select Sires is we're trying to prepare our people. With my role in training, this is a lot of what I'm trying to do to prepare our people to see how they are going to have to develop themselves and evolve themselves to be able to deal with the customer of the future and their needs. They're going to have to be more consultative. It's not going to be just about selling a straw semen, breeding a cow, or genetics. It's going to be consultative, understanding bigger parts of that customer's operation. I think with genomics, we're very lucky because we're seeing the fruit of this technology right now to be able to change cows. More emphasis on health and wellness, productivity, productive life, fertility traits. Traits like dairy wellness profit dollars from Zoetis has become a great tool for us as we try to create a cow that can be productive and economical to make money for the customer, last, and as well as tying into some of these welfare issues of having a cow that can do it easier and last longer. I think research and selection for feed efficiency is a big part of our future, for longevity, for disease, tying into some of these environmental issues such as nitrate output, phosphate, methane output is all going to be part of our genetic selection as we go forward. There's a huge opportunity, and we need to dig into and understand more about epigenetics, is what really genes get turned on and turned off. What we really know right now isn't everything that we will know in the future. We're going to have to continue to learn and to understand how genes really work. And we're really just scratching the surface right now. Gene editing can be a tremendous tool. For instance, bringing in the SLIC gene to be able to give the Holstein cow a better heat tolerance. Gene editing, a lot of this isn't going to be the technology holding us back as much as consumer perception. So a lot of these things we won't know until we get into the future to know whether these tools are going to be available for us. Bull selection for specific world markets, countries, or even operations. I can see us having bulls standing at our stud for a set of operations based on how they market milk, what their environment is, what their needs are, and exploring how embryos are going to fit into a genetic offering. So a lot of different things are going to change. But you know, in my career, how I've seen things change anyway. This is a national champion in the United States just before I was born. And you know, if we look at that cow today, we might say, well, she's a little too round, her teats are a little too big, a little too thick. And over time, we selected for cows that were more dairy till we got to a cow like Butts Butler Gold Barbara that was the epitome of dairiness. But we found out that we let that pendulum swing a little bit too far. And as I look at what the ideal is today, we're kind of swinging in between those two extremes as to what we want. And I think that'll be that with a lot of traits. Are cows too big? Well, can we make them too small? And so I think a lot of breeding, we need to understand that extremes aren't where we need to be. And we need to find that sweet spot in between some of these extremes as we breed certain traits for cows that we don't overcorrect what we're trying to fix. You know, this is just a kind of a funny picture I took. I was in Costa Rica on a grazing farm, And I came back and I told the sire department, if you can figure out how to make a cow's one leg longer than the other, that would be the perfect cow for that operation because of the way they have to graze off of the side of a volcano. As a climate change and we try to produce milk in places like Australia, parts of Australia and Asia, South America and Africa, to have the best of both worlds of the Bos Indicus and the Holstein, this is where things like gene editing can come into place. So a lot of these tools are going to be available to us, but things are changing. For instance, herds getting larger. In the United States right now, about 30%, 36% of the milk, even though there's 35-some thousand dairies, 700 dairies are producing nearly 36% of the milk, or 2,500 cows and larger. But I'm not sure herds are going to just continue to get larger. Just because that's been the trend doesn't mean that's going to be the future. We already have here in the United States, 2 of our presidential candidates are saying that the first thing they would do is outlaw factory farms and put a cap on how many animals you can have on an operation. We're also seeing dairies that can't milk 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 cows are getting into boutique production, producing craft cheese or chocolate milk, agro-tourism. So there's lots of different ways for us to go into the future and not just get hung up on the fact that if you don't milk 10,000 cows, you're not going to have a future. So our world's changing fast. Here in the US, we've got a series of ads with a character called Captain Obvious. And probably what all of the things I just said to you said, well, Joel, you sound like Captain Obvious. Thank you, Captain Obvious. And so when I think about this and predicting the future, a lot of people predict the future, but how do you know? This guy wasn't quite right, although May of this year I thought might have been Judgment Day and the end of the year with the things going on. This Arizona psychic got hit by a car, says he never saw it coming. Evidently, not everybody can see the future. So there's lots of examples of people that didn't predict the future very well. This pandemic that we're dealing with right now, they call a black swan. It's part of the black swan theory, is this whole idea that people in Europe at that time thought swans were only white because they didn't know black swans existed. Now they existed, they just didn't know it. So there's some controversy right now about whether this COVID-19 pandemic is really black swan or not, because we really should have known it was out there and that it could happen. But the point is, you can't prepare for everything that might happen. And a lot of the things that are out there, we don't want to see. And so I'm not so sure it's black swan as much as it's black ostrich, that sometimes we stick our head in the sand because we don't like what we see. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. It's the future and it's what we're going to do about it. Now, to go deeper into this, if you want to, there's a great article that was put together by J.H. Britt about what the vision of the dairy industry and dairy cows and farms is going to look like in the year 2067. And I'd invite you to go out there and read that. It's a really interesting article that would give you more than I can in a 30-minute program here today. So I was thinking, how can I really help with this program? Because I don't know for sure. And there's other stuff out there that's probably better economics and predictions than I could give you as a layman. But with what I do, last year at our national sales conference, I put together a program for our people based on how do they stay relevant for the future. And I thought about it as I looked at this program, how that applies not only to our people, but also to you as dairy producers in Australia. How are you going to stay relevant? And these same points, a lot of these same points fit you as much as they do our own people. So if I can prepare you with how you think and your characteristics and the way your mind works to prepare you for a future that I'm not exactly sure how it's going to happen, and it's going to change very quickly, just like the events we've seen over the last few months. If we can understand relevance a little bit better and how we can stay relevant, then I think we will prepare ourselves for the future no matter what comes. So to understand relevance, my definition of relevance, it's important or significant in that situation or to that person at that time. It's a moving target. It's about creating value in someone else's life. We as a dairy industry need to get consumers to see that we create value for them, being able to feed a hungry world in the future, and that what we're doing is of value. There's a great YouTube video out there by a pastor named Rick Warren on relevance. And he talks about irrelevance as when the speed of change around you is faster than the speed of change within you, you become irrelevant. Well, I guarantee I don't have to tell you that the world is changing faster outside than we can possibly deal with inside. But that's the definition of irrelevance. He goes on to say, if you always do what you've always done, now the old saying is you'll always get what you always got. That won't be true in the future. If you always do what you've always done, you will become irrelevant. And so this constantly changing to evolve and looking forward, not past, to the past. So those who dwell on the past will remain in it, but those who believe in the future will create it. And we need to be optimistic as we look forward into the future. So look forward, because that's the direction we're going as we go. So I created this 14 points that I'm going to quickly work through, and I want you to think about how that applies to you as dairy producers and work through some of these. Being adaptive, open-minded, a curiosity, a lifelong learner, the knowledge from 20 years ago is of very little value. And in fact, the value of some of the things we learned a year ago or even 3 months ago sometimes are not very much value. I'm going to talk about traits like humility. It sounds maybe strange, but how this all fits together in us staying relevant. We all have a comfort zone. That's why it's comfortable. That's where we want to stay. The events of what's happened in the dairy industry in Australia with droughts, fires, floods, milk price changes, we would love to go and crawl back to our comfort zone, but we get pushed out of our comfort zone. But the point is, rather than having the world and events push you out of your comfort zone, push yourself, disrupt yourself so you're constantly questioning everything. Pushing yourself through that fear zone, through the learning zone, and you find that you can learn and thrive in this new future. But it was pointed out to me one time that as you get yourself out of the comfort zone and you go through this, where you get yourself to is another comfort zone. So this is a continual process that we have to be continually pushing ourselves through the comfort zone, learning, opening, being adaptive, to get to that next phase and continuing to disrupt ourselves as we push through to the next phase to prepare ourselves for an evolving future. Now, humility may sound like a strange trait, but I read a great book a few years ago called Egonomics, and it talked about the role of ego in business and in relationships. And I love this definition of humility because it's all about, takes humility to learn. It takes humility to admit I don't know something, that I need to learn, that I need to ask my 21-year-old son how to help me make Zoom work. That takes humility. And so I think humility is going to be one of the important traits that we have in dealing with the future and dealing with other people. We believe in ourselves, but we know that we have so much to learn. And being open-minded with new things like technology. I love this old slide. This was from one of our researchers at one of our cooperatives back in the days where they were trying to prove frozen semen would work. And if you look at March of that year, I guarantee this researcher was being told this is never going to work. And we have to be patient. We have to have some humility that we have things to learn as we work through technological change and new ideas and new things as we go forward. So what holds us back from changing? Fear, in some cases, is fear of it might not work. But we have to look beyond that fear as this is our future and it's what we need to do. I read another great book recently as I've had time since I'm not traveling called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. A lot of the skills and the things you knew from the past, we have to let go of because they're only going to hold us back as we go forward. And in some cases, past success holds us back because we think we have a formula for success of how it used to work. But that formula may no longer be relevant as we go forward. So when I think about my career, this is how dairies in the upper Midwest used to evolve. As they got bigger, they just added on, did more of this of what they did before, just did more of it. And in Eastern Europe, as some of the dairies we visit there, they have old ways of doing things, and farmers wanted to retrofit some of these barns to fit a modern age and milk 1,000 cows in an old collective operation like this. And I was at one of these operations one time, and the guy asked me, he said, what do you think how I should fix my barn to make it modern and make it work for the future? And I was trying to think of a diplomatic way. He said, well, you know, one of your consultants was just here, and he told me I should fix it with a bulldozer. And it got me thinking that we probably should pull a virtual bulldozer out on our career and how we do things, constantly questioning how we do things and not just trying to make what we did in the past fit for the future. And sometimes, just like these old barns, we need to knock it down and build fresh. Now, a lot of what we had is still relevant and we can carry it forward, but some things aren't relevant. So sometimes we have to be able to let go of how we did things, even though it's painful for all of us. Let go so that we can move on. And even though things don't always turn out, I didn't intend to get into the AI industry. I intended to milk Guernsey cows on a small farm in Western Ohio for the rest of my life. It didn't work out in the late 70s, and I ended up getting in this business. That doesn't mean I failed. It just means things changed, and I found a new way to serve the dairy industry in my role that I have today. But it's tough out there, Captain Obvious would tell you. It's tough out there. I'm not trying to make light of any of this with what we're dealing with, and nobody knows this more than an Australian dairy producer. But we've got to be resilient. We've got to have what I call a professional optimism. Professional optimism is you, no matter how you feel, no matter how negative you feel, you have the ability to turn that on, because psychologically, optimism is where we find creativity and can do problem solving. Pessimism for the future will never be able to solve problems. And emotional intelligence, I'll talk about that in a bit. But a lot of what we're dealing with is like going through a death, the grieving process. I talk about letting go, but that's not an easy process. And we have to work through these steps of grieving with how we did things, or farmers that are no longer going to be able to be in business. But until we get to that acceptance and hope, we can't move on. And ultimately, we have to move on. I know it's tough out there. I was at a seminar last year, and this was kind of tough advice, I thought. We were complaining about some things that seem pretty trivial now. But the instructor said to us, it's okay, this is therapeutic to complain, and it's okay to, what she said, visit Pity City. But you can't live there. And so we can't just pity ourselves. We've got to figure out, well, this is what happened. What are we going to do about it? And that's the future. The idea of Muhammad Ali that said, if you don't lose, if you get knocked down. And I, as a dairy industry, we sure feel like we've taken an awful lot of hits and been knocked down an awful lot. But we've got to keep getting back up. So there's different ways, even if you get knocked down, that you can continue to grow. In Australia, of all places, I put these pictures in because it was, to me, inspirational after the devastation of the fires. Life has a way of repairing itself and moving on in spite of what happened. We're seeing it with following some floods we had here in my hometown. Hopefully we'll see it after some of these riots that are going on in our cities in the U.S. now. Life has a way of repairing itself and moving on, though that may be different in the future. We're all survivors. We are the result of our ancestors surviving pandemics, wars, all types of diseases, all types of climate change, volcanoes, earthquakes, all kinds of things. This has been the history of the world. It shouldn't be a surprise for us, even though we want a more stable future. But preparing ourselves for whatever comes out of this is how we're going to be successful. One of the concepts that helps me is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is this idea of concentrating on that circle of influence, those things that we can do something about. I couldn't come to Australia for this conference. I would have liked to have been able to do that. But what can we do? That's what we're doing this morning. We're finding new ways to get things done. And as we work more and more with what we can do and what we can influence, we start to gain more control and power, and that circle of influence starts to grow. And so I think this is an important concept. Not easy, and I need to keep constantly reminding myself of this as myself also. Emotional intelligence, communication skills, finding innovative ways to do things. More and more, you will be communicating and teaching people, using that soft skills side of your brain, that it's not just going to be technical knowledge. It's going to be communication, collaboration, creativity that is your future. And we call these soft skills like they're not that important, but they are. These should be called essential skills that even as dairy producers, you need to develop more and more. You will be more and more working in teams on your operations as farms get larger, and therefore leadership skills and facilitation skills have to become part of what you do beyond your animal handling skills. Having a team where everybody's on the same page that doesn't just happen. And so your ability to become a better team leader will become more important. As people see each other and understand what each other are doing, your ability to facilitate meetings like this, get people to communicate is going to be your future. Getting people to leave their egos in the box and learning to be able to communicate. This is where things like humility come back in. And so, yeah, there is no I in team. We've got to work together. Although I recently saw this out on Facebook that there is an A in team when you look at just the a-hole there. But the evolution of leadership skills, you as dairy producers, moving from just being a doer or doing everything yourself, just being the boss, being a manager, to being a leader. And that will be part of your future. Leadership is delivering results through people. And that's going to be a big part of your future. A strong sense of why. This goes back to a book I read several years ago and actually went back and reread last year for a program. But the whole idea is we spend most of our time thinking about what we do, sometimes how we do it, but what really drives us and where our energy comes from, the core is why we do what we do. And thinking about why we do what we do. The outside behavior we see from someone comes from their motivation. And their motivation comes from their passion. And passion comes from purpose or having a sense of why. In the world we're dealing with right now, in the dairy industry and the greater world as well, it's pretty easy for these connections to become disconnected, and we no longer remember why we do what we do. And so as I read this book, it inspired me again to get back to, why do I do what I do? If I want to stay relevant, I better be able to know why I do what I do. And I recreated this vision of why I do what I do. And I want to make a difference in the world by providing leadership through training and interaction with others. I hope I'm doing a little bit of that right now. That helps people to improve and to develop to be the best and the happiest that they can be. To inspire others to find what inspires them. That's my why. I would encourage you to write your own why and think about it, because that's where your motivation and energy comes from. I took that why and I wrote it down and I put it on my computer screen so that I see it on a continual basis. And sometimes it's not so easy. I look over to those icons and I say a little prayer and I go back and I remember, yeah, this is why I do what I do. I think this is important. I've got a copy of it in my vehicle so that I see it as a reminder. So just something I want you to think about as to what your why and what your purpose is. The last one here is take responsibility and be all in. We've got to take responsibility for ourselves. Nobody else is going to do it for us. We've got to have the discipline to not just learn something, but to actually put it into practice. That's going to be a big part of what we do. And all in goes back to our sales conference speaker that we had last year at Select Sires, a guy named John Paul Gonzalez. He helped one of the American football teams to win the Super Bowl by getting them to totally commit to winning, to commit to each other in a mindset of positivity. I would again encourage you to go out and see a YouTube video John Paul has out there. Found it very inspiring. But we can't have one foot in and one foot out. We've got to be all in to each other, to this industry, to making improvement. So just like playing poker, when you believe in what you're doing, you're all in. You're betting all your chips that this is where things are going to go. And the last thing I've got is staying relevant is very much a choice. It's not easy, but it's a choice. And it's like that fork in the road. You've got to choose yourself. Which way are you going to go to stay relevant for the future? You may not like where it's going, but it's where the future is going. So the downhill path, that's the easy one. That's the way we've always done things. It's the comfort zone. It's where we're comfortable. That uphill path isn't easy. It's full of rocks and curves, and we're going to see things we've never seen before to prepare ourselves for that future. And it's a little bit scary, but it's the right road. I know that it is, even though it's not the easy one. So I believe in this industry. There is a future for this industry. It's going to be different, and it's going to be people that have some of these 14 skills and characteristics that I just talked about, and that long-term, what we do is important. We're going to need to feed a growing world, and we keep hearing that, and right now we're told we're overproducing. But long-term, it's true. We're going to have to find ways to produce more protein to feed a growing world, and we need to find ways to stay relevant as we work through this. So I hope that has given you some ideas to think about where things might go. I don't know if it's exactly what you were looking for, Genetics Australia, but I hope in some ways this is giving you a different perspective. And I think sometimes that's what we do. We give each other a gift of perspective as we help each other. And that's an important part of this as well. We need to help each other through this. We need to have a support network, and we need to inspire each other that there will be a bright future for us if we work together. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joel. That was such an inspiring presentation. So, and probably something that we could all probably do with at the moment. I will now ask if anyone wants to, shoot through any questions that they want to ask Joel whilst we have him on board. You can do so just by the chat or through the Q&A option there. I guess one thing that I was thinking about towards the end of your presentation there, Joel, was about, you've obviously been with Worldwide Sires for a long time. What has caused you to be in that business for so long? What has really been your fulfillment and, a key to, I guess, a lot of people wanting to stay in the dairy industry for a long time? Is there something, any pointers that you can kind of put across that might resonate with that?
Well, this really is a special industry, and when we're dealing with it every day, we do forget that, and that's why that whole sense of why is a big part of it. But this is a special place, this dairy industry, and globally. As I've dealt more and more with outside industries, other types of industries, I come back with a greater appreciation for how special this business is. The people that are in it, their passion, the love of the dairy cow, feeding the world, all those types of things, I wouldn't trade it for any other industry, in spite of its warts and problems. And that's one of the things I've learned as I've done some outside training with people in other industries. They have their own problems. whether you're in the computer industry, there's whole industries that come and go at the blink of an eye. You know, we're finding what's essential and what's not essential right now as we work through this pandemic. Food production is essential, even though it's not easy and we do get beat up a lot. But I believe that it's my mission. I believe this is, you know, not to get religious, but it's a bit of my mission and God's work a little bit to be able to help people to feed the world. And I don't mean that in a cliche type of way. Not a lot of jobs give you that ability. And with the AI industry, we are creating the future. And what could be more exciting and fulfilling than creating the future?
Yeah, love that. Had another question just pop in. It says, do you see an increasing role for the hybrid or crossbred cows in more challenging environments that we see around the world?
Yeah, and I think we need to stay open-minded to some of these types of ideas. It's been interesting as crossbreeding, for instance, really woke up the Holstein breed. But I think today we have some of the tools that it depends on what a customer's real needs are. But within the Holstein breed, because of the size of the breed and our ability to use genomics, we've found that we can create cows that have the longevity and have the fertility and have the adaptability. And using genomics, and maybe in the future we'll have tools like gene editing where we can actually get the traits we want without giving up the other traits that are important to us, which often happens with crossbreeding. But I think we have to have an open mind to whatever adaptability we have to have.
Absolutely. Another quick question. Do you see, you know, obviously there's a lot of dairy breeds in the world and, you know, mostly taken up by the Holstein breed. Do you see that some of those breeds will eventually, I guess, be bred out of the industry and kind of taken over by the Holstein? Or do you kind of think that, you know, that there will always be room in the dairy industry for some of those kind of smaller populated color breeds? Well,
I grew up with Guernseys, if that tells you anything. And I think, you know, it would be a loss to our future because we don't know what the future holds. Maybe there's characteristics in Guernsey milk that we're going to need in the future. So I hope we continue to have these breeds continue, the people have passion, but to be aggressive with those breeds to make sure that they are still relevant for the future we're in. But I think that's going to be important in the future. The Jersey breed continues to grow for us on a global basis. But again, I think we need to stay open-minded to these things.
And I know that, you know, certainly in Australia, we do have, you know, I guess you come across a problem of, particularly in the Jersey breed, the likes of finding outcross sires for breeding programs. Do you see kind of inbreeding, or, you know, sometimes people refer to it as line breeding? Do you see that as an issue?
Well, it's interesting. They're again predicting the future. I went back and looked at a genomics presentation I did in 2008. And one of my predictions was that we will find more outcrosses because of genomics. We'll be able to go out and take a tissue sample or a hair sample and find a cow in a large commercial herd that's not related to anything, and we'll be able to make her a bull mother. Well, that wasn't a very good prediction, because in reality, genomics has led us down a path of what we know. It tends to overvalue what it knows and doesn't know how to value what it doesn't know. And so right now, that's an issue with our genomic selection. It's something we're going to need to work through to understand how things work and just the values we put in genomics. I'm not a geneticist, and so I don't want to speak outside my expertise here. It's just observation that it's one of the things we're striving for, because right now the way the system works, if you find an outcross, he's not going to rank genetically as high as something that is very close to the rest of the population. And I think these are things that we need to continue as an industry to research, to find out why that is. Do we need to regress the numbers somehow? Those are things we need to find out in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
But the good news is today we have the ability that we didn't have in the past. So if we've got an animal that's more inbred than we would have accepted in the past, we have numbers to know that whether or not the production is being regressed because of inbreeding, or fertility is suffering because of inbreeding, or that longevity is affected. We have numbers on productive life and fertility, and those are kind of built in the system. And so we do have tools to manage inbreeding better today than we did in the past because of genomics. So we can probably tolerate more inbreeding today than we thought we could in the past.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess that kind of leads on to one of the other questions that's popped up regarding daughter-proven bulls, a thing of the past. What's your perspective on that?
That's really interesting, because there again, we predicted that would we even be selling proven bulls by 2020. And interestingly enough, I just was in a meeting the other day, and last month, Select Sires actually sold more proven semen than genomic semen. And a lot of this has to do with the quality of some of our proven bulls right now and how they rank. But I think there's certainly a place for both as we get the whole picture on a proven bull where we know even more about that bull. And so I think the industry is going to have a place for both.
Yeah, fantastic. One of the other questions that's popped up is along the lines of what's the most important change you believe needs to happen to keep the industry relevant? It's probably a difficult one, isn't it?
Well, in my lifetime, I would say it is genomics, even though we don't know everything we need to know. But it opened the book for us of being able to see inside that animal, being able to change that population in a very short time. So for instance, if A2, the entire world wants A2, a big concern, especially in Australia, but it's spreading around the world right now. We have the ability to change the population very quickly because of genomics and go out and select those animals because we're selling genomic semen. Instead of putting out 10 bulls and hoping we get one 4 years from now, we're able to select a population, and as soon as that bull is created and can produce semen, we can start selling semen on that bull and changing the population. And so if polled suddenly becomes what we're forced to do because of animal activists, just as a possibility, while we may sacrifice some production and some other traits to do that, we have the ability to go out and change the population very quickly because of genomics. Genomics has allowed us to make a cow that doesn't just give more milk, but can do it easier, that can last longer without taking it out of herself. And that's going to be the tool to answering some of these animal activists and others that say that don't want us using antibiotics and treating cows the way we have. They want us to have a cow that we have to manage less, but is productive and lasts longer, has more disease resistance. Genomics opened the door for that, and we've got a lot to learn as we go forward.
Mm-hmm. Another question that's popped up, and I guess as similar to what we were discussing earlier, is what is the Select Sires plan for other breeds, which do not include the database size of Holsteins and Jerseys?
Well, it's kind of a supply and demand situation, as it's based on demand, as the number of units of semen and that we can sell on certain breeds determines how many of those bulls we bring into the program. And so it very much is, you know, our old manager, Dick Chichester, used to say, every time a farmer buys a straw of semen, he's voting for the type of bull that he wants. And that's true of the breeds as well. And so we continue to maintain those breeds as best we can, but it's proportional based on what the demand is.
Fantastic. And just a couple more questions. Will the rapid uptake of sex semen give our dairy industry the chance to play a greater role as a beef producer, or to produce dairy beef cross calves, and to help diversify farming income?
And that's exactly what's happening. The amount of beef semen we're selling right now, and the bulls we're selling, it continues to change to adapt to the market. In the beginning, it was maybe just a beef calf, maybe just a black calf. Now we're looking at the traits that the buyers want, all the way out to the consumer, so that we can create a beef cross calf that feedlots can actually be profitable with, that have the marbling that consumers want and the cutability. And so that's an important part of it. And so more and more, some of our training for our dairy people has been getting them to better understand EPDs on the beef bulls and the different bulls that best fit a dairy operation, because we have improved fertility and the number of heifers that people need has dropped. And so, you know, worldwide, what we're seeing is the ability to use sex semen on my genetically my best females, and then use beef on the animals that I really don't want replacements from it. And so being able to take that to the next level, to not just produce a beef cross calf, but to produce something that the market wants, is going to continue to evolve.
And that might lead on to our last question here, which is, with the upswing of allergies around the world and the increasing choice of alternative beverages and products like nut juices, do you see that there will be a time in the near future where selection of sires would be based on their ability to breed special characteristics that match these alternative beverages to ultimately counter, you know, soy, rice, oat beverages?
That's an interesting question, and it may, and it won't be necessarily to match those characteristics, but what consumers want. Although it was really interesting to me through this pandemic, as milk was flying off the shelf. I was in our local grocery store, and the only thing left on the shelf were the nut milks. People had cleaned out all the dairy milk, all that other type of stuff. But I think we have to understand what the consumers want. And again, if it's A2, we have the ability to change the population very quickly. If it's other characteristics in milk that we can do to improve it, either at the genetic level, process, or at the processor level, things that they are doing. There's some interesting things being done to redevelop milk with some processors here, where they're making a milk that has a higher protein and lower fat. And so, yeah, we're going to have to continue to look forward and evolve and adapt, both genetically and as processors.
And one question just to finish off, Joel: who's the next big sire of sons in the Holstein breed?
I don't know. He probably isn't born yet.
Just to
because we're making them
one.
sires of sons. We're making them sires of sons before they're even born. And so, you know, that's been an interesting part of this whole thing with genomics. It's going to continue to change, and very quickly that outcross bull, whoever he is, will no longer be an outcross, because it changes so quickly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Joel.
My pleasure.
Next week we'll be joined by another guest presenter, also joining us from the States, which is Juan Marino, the founder and CEO of Sexing Technologies. And Juan will be discussing the topic of ST's trademark product, sex semen. So We'll certainly guarantee to be another interesting topic, and we hope that all our viewers will be able to join us then. So until then, please keep safe. We'll keep you updated via email or our social channels. This presentation will be sent through probably for you this afternoon, Joel, or for our local viewers, it'll be sent in the morning. So thank you again, and yeah, hope to see you all next week.
Thank you, Claire.